Hey, how's everybody doing today? If those of y'all been here before, welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. And for those of y'all who have no idea who I am, allow me to introduce myself. For it as I say, it's me, Cisco Soldier, aka Uncle Trey. Welcome back to the channel. Hey, today I have a real special guest here today, right? I am so humbled to be able to talk to this individual today. Today I have a software engineer to come and talk to all you guys today, who goes by the name of Kilo Loco. All right. I've been watching him on YouTube. You know, he's inspired me to do what I do. So I'm just thankful that he is here today. How's everything going, Kilo?
Everything's going really good. Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks, and I really appreciate it. Always looking to help more people. So really
That's
happy to
right.
be here. Thank you for having me.
Hey man, so you are a software engineer, right? And you work for a very large and reputable company. We'll get into that later, but could you tell the people like that's out there watching that have no idea, like what exactly is a software engineer in your words?
Yeah, so a software engineer is pretty much somebody that goes out and they'll write code, right? So they use programming to write code, and we essentially make things like apps. So like any apps that you have on your mobile phone, or the websites that you go and visit, and like YouTube is technically a web app. So there's software engineers that made YouTube, and pretty much all of that. And then there's stuff that goes on behind the scenes to make sure that like you can actually view this video. This video is living somewhere. So a software engineer deals with the software that is used to be able to consume something in one shape or form, whether it be like in an app on your phone or a website on your desktop.
Okay, that sounds good enough. So like, for instance, right? Like, so if we were talking about something like Facebook, everybody's pretty much familiar with Facebook out there, right? And if I wanted to develop like an application, like let's say for instance, right? Like I was looking at somebody's status and I was like, man, they only have a like button. I wish I could click don't like and just drop the mic real quick. Like, so like what could, like, as a software engineer, how would you go about developing a don't like button, just to let the people know real quick?
Yeah, so usually on these larger platforms like Facebook, for example, they have hundreds of software engineers, right? And what would normally happen is, in this particular instance where you're talking about don't like on Facebook, right? There would actually be an entire team that is revolved around like implementing that feature. And the product manager, the person that kind of comes up with these ideas or is responsible for releasing these ideas and having them be put out as a concept, would then go to the engineering team, talk to software engineers like myself, and say, look, we need to add a don't like button. And what would happen is there would be a lot of communication that goes back and forth. There'd probably be some documents that are written up of what all the functionality needs to happen when you hit don't like. I mean, it's very obvious, but sometimes there's like really small use cases that need to be taken care of. And what would then happen is the software engineer would understand what needs to be done, and usually they're given a design. Some designer would go and show them what exactly it's supposed to look like before they actually start writing code. And then the software engineer would actually start writing code. They would add that button to the area where it's specified that the don't like button is supposed to go. And then they would also implement the functionality of what's supposed to happen when you tap the don't like button. Are there any animations? Is it simply just doing an increment to the dislike count? Is it taking away from the likes count? All that stuff needs to be handled by the software engineer. And usually it's not just one, but it's several engineers that need to be pulled in and involved in this entire process.
So you guys kind of like work in teams. Is that what you're saying?
Usually when it's bigger companies and apps that you're most familiar with, it's usually a team of engineers that would work together. Now, if you wanted to go out and create the next Facebook app, then you could definitely do that. And you could theoretically go out and do it all by yourself. It would definitely be extremely difficult. A lot of people try to do these things. It's a very competitive space, but it is something that you could do on your own. You could go create a complete app from scratch and then put it out there for the world to enjoy. And those are what we usually call in this industry as indie developers, independent developers, where they create apps that they want to release and they just put them out as an individual.
So like, okay, so for instance, right? So let's say me, right? Cisco Soldier, aka Uncle Trey, if I can refer to myself in the third person, right? Let's say I was watching this video, right? And I said, man, right now I'm a carpenter, and because of like the whole COVID-19 thing, things have been shut down. So I'm looking to change careers in the fact that, if this happens again, that I can find a job where I can remote and work from home and things of that nature, right? So like, what type of educational or experience background would you need to pursue a career in software development?
Yeah, sure. Did you want just a quick glimpse, or should I talk about like my path?
Well, you know what? I think right now would be the time. I think we've warmed it up a little bit. You know what I mean? So go ahead and tell everybody right now, like, hey, what were you doing 4.5 years ago?
Yeah, got it. So 4.5 years ago, actually just like 4 years ago, I was still employed at not a fast food restaurant, but a Mexican food restaurant. And
okay.
I was trying a lot of different things while I was there. I was there over the period of 6 years, on and off. I tried a lot of different things. When I first started out, when I first got hired there, I was 18 going on 19, and I was going to school full time. I was actually going to college, and I went to a community college. I did get an associate's, but that actually was completely useless. It was an associate's in psychology, which it has no application. Actually, it was mostly just to make my parents proud that their son did go to college and they had something, so maybe they'll be a little bit better off, but it actually never turned into anything. But anyways, I went to community college, and I did start going to a university at one point, but then I dropped out. It just wasn't for me. So I don't have a bachelor's, and usually when people hear about this field, they think that they need a bachelor's degree in CS, which is computer science. So you'll see like a lot of job applications will actually say, minimum requirement 4 years BS in CS, so a bachelor's in a bachelor's of science in computer science or something like that. Anyways, I was going down this route in school, but then I just dropped out. I was working at the restaurant for the most part. That was my primary income. I was making less than $30,000 a year, and I tried a lot of different things along the way. I tried car sales, I tried real estate, telemarketing. I did a lot of different things. And eventually I came across the path of development. I was actually trying out web development. My dad, he was always very into computers, always had a computer in the house, and he always mentioned that making websites was a great way to make money. So I finally listened to my dad after 20 years of him telling me amazing stuff, but just not listening. But essentially, I started doing web development in my spare time, and sometimes when I was working at the restaurant when it was slow. And keep in mind that I was with my girlfriend at the time. She's my wife now, but she had a kid from a previous relationship. So we moved out together, and it was kind of like I started my own family, right? So I was like 20 years old. No, I was 19 years old, moved out with my girlfriend, and she has a son. So now it's like an instant family, and I have responsibilities. I have bills to pay. I'm working at a restaurant. And then the only time that I really had for myself was it was a part-time job, so I had a little bit more time, but it was like mostly during the nights. And eventually when I did stumble across coding, it was about 4 years into me being at the restaurant. And it really wasn't for me. I hated working there, and I just wanted to try something different. And it was only for money, honestly. Like the only reason why I went down this path was for money.
At least you're real about it, man.
Like straight up, it was websites. If I could sling out like a website for like $100 to $500 and just do like a couple of those a month, it would have been great money for me. It would have way more enjoyable, and I wouldn't have to go work at a place that I hated. It turned out that I really didn't like web development, so I started trying iOS development. Now this is back in 2014. Yeah, about 2014 I started doing iOS development. and a new programming language. There's a lot of different programming languages and a lot of different ways that you could do coding. A new programming language came out, and it's called Swift, but essentially it was a fresh start for a lot of people. And when I jumped on this new programming language and I started going down this path, I really got into it. So I was still like off and on at the time, 2014, but towards the end of 2015, I really started going after development. Like I had enough of being at the restaurant, and I knew that I wanted to make a change. So then during 2015, I'm like 24 or something like that. And I actually start learning online. I'm watching all kinds of YouTube videos. I'm taking little small online courses like on sites like Udemy and Udacity, udemy.com, udacity.com, just youtube.com. There's like a lot of information out there, right? And I'm just learning all by myself. And eventually I am able to actually put out my own app into the App Store. Now,
well, let me stop you right there right quick. So now when you go back, right? So you said, hey, I wanted to start coding, right? So basically what you're saying is like, hey, you're self-taught. You're like, hey, I just have to learn everything I can and do what I can to apply for certain jobs. Like, were you already working in a certain job, or were you just trying to learn what you could, knowing that, hey, I'm going to apply in like 6 months or a year or whatever the case may be?
Yeah. So let me clarify. Yeah. So I was just working at the restaurant. I had like eventually got back into the restaurant full time. I like left. I think the last position was car sales, and then I just went back into the restaurant full time. And all I did was I watched YouTube videos. I took like $10 online classes, and I learned as much as I could about creating apps.
Like apps for phones, apps for like the websites. Like what type of apps are you talking about?
I'm specifically talking about iOS apps, so apps for iPhone.
Okay.
And the reason why I chose that path is because at the time I was like just a complete 100% Apple fanboy. I had not the first iPod, but like one of the first iPods. Yeah. I think I already had an iPhone at the time and everything. So it made sense for me to go down that path. Now you could choose web development, you could choose Android development, iOS development, you could choose whatever. Coding is a good path to go down, financially speaking, and it could also be fun and really fulfilling. But yeah, like I started learning how to create iOS apps. I released one. It boosted my confidence. I felt a little bit like, hey, I kind of know what I'm doing. I continue to learn, I'm continuing to learn, but I'm also now actively searching. And I was searching everywhere. I was applying for places, at the careers link at the very bottom of every website's, screen. There's usually like a careers link. I was going to meetup.com, which is essentially a place where you can just find like different types of little events that you can be part of and meet up with.
You're talking about right now, you're trying to find a job is what you're saying? Like you're actively.
So this is let me think. This is 2016. So
Okay.
2016, I'm still employed at the restaurant, and I'm actively looking for a job. Going on websites. I'm trying meetup.com.
Okay.
And I'm trying to become a iOS developer, a junior iOS developer, right? And be hired as such, right?
Okay.
So I'm applying to all these places and actually getting a couple of callbacks here and there. The interview process is tough for a beginner, but it just takes a little bit of practice. And eventually I had reached out to somebody on meetup.com, and they were looking for an iOS developer. It was like a contract to hire position, so they wanted to see how I would perform during the first 3 months, and then they would hire me. When I actually reached out to them and talked to them, we had like a very informal interview. It actually took place at a Starbucks, which was really interesting.
Right.
And it was just a small little startup. They were paying well below a software engineer's salary, but that was fine for me because well below a software engineer's salary was way more than what I was making at the restaurant. So let's talk a little bit about that. At the restaurant, I had moved up from host all the way up to manager. I had gone through all the positions: host, busser, server, bartender and manager. I'd done all of those things during the 6 years I had moved up. And when I left there, I was working mostly as a bartender, and I was making the most money because of my tips. And I was making about $30,000 a year. When I was looking for a job, I knew that software engineers get paid really well. And when I was asked what my rate was, I believe I said that I could not do anything lower than $35 an hour. Now, in California, which is where I live, the minimum wage was like $10 an hour.
Okay.
So I was really pushing it. $35 an hour was an amazing jump for me. And that was for the contracting position. And then when I got brought on, they actually lowered my pay, but they said since it's consistent, like since I'm going to be brought on like essentially salary, but not really salary because it was like a startup. But since I'd be brought on and it was like long-term employment, I would be making about $65,000 a year. So I was making double.
Hey, let me ask you something real quick. Kilolo. So put like this right now, you did that, basically kind of like, hey, just going out there and making things happen, self-negotiating. Like say a lot of your experience is being self-taught. Now that you know what you know, right? Are there any ways that I could go out there right now and check and see what an actual software developer is getting paid? So that way I kind of know what to walk into the negotiations with. Is there a place I can go out there and check?
Yeah. I mean, you could Google it and you can type in your area, right? Like I live in Southern California, so I would normally Google like software engineer salary or software developer salary in LA. And then I could get a range on that. It's not really accurate actually, but I mean, you can. But overall, I would say, and this might be bad advice for some people, but like if you're just breaking into the industry, I would say that there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in regards to negotiating unless you like really built up a really strong portfolio and you are extremely confident in your capabilities and you really know that you can go in there and make an impact, and it's not going to be about like you learning, it's going to be about like you executing, which I feel like in this industry, we have what is it called? Impostor syndrome. It's a really strong thing in this community. And if you're not familiar with what imposter syndrome is, it's essentially feeling like you're an imposter and like this house of cards is ready to fall at any given moment because you don't feel like you actually went through the official channels to be considered a software engineer or whatever title it is.
Back in the day, they just say instead of imposter syndrome, they say fake it till you make it.
Exactly. But like faking it till you're making it, until you make it, like gives you that like, what if somebody finds out?
Yeah.
But, like, and it's something that I still have too. Like I still have imposter syndrome, and I know that people that have been in this career for years still have that. So yeah, if you feel that you're a strong candidate for the position, definitely feel free to negotiate. I did not negotiate with the first position. I actually didn't negotiate with a lot of my positions, and I know that I'm wrong for that. But a lot of it comes down to feeling like the way that I saw it was I needed to get into the industry, and then once I get into the industry, then it would be a lot easier moving forward, and I would have some experience on my resume. And, then I would have more room to negotiate. But when I'm just breaking into the industry, I just didn't feel like that was a good thing for me to try to pursue too strongly.
Okay. Now we're talking about, this is 2016, 2017, kind of like the first gig. How long were you actually at that particular company, that startup company?
Yeah. So I did. So I'm not normal, right? Like I don't do what a lot of people do in this industry. It's very common for you to be at a company for about 6 months to 2 years and then leave. And there's a lot of reasons to do that. You could change a company, you can make a lot more money, you could have a way better title, all kinds of stuff, right? But I feel like I have like an older mentality when it comes to work, where it's more like I'm more loyal to my companies, where when I know that it's a very terrible thing to be doing nowadays. You definitely shouldn't be loyal to your companies, but I am. Like when I work somewhere, I try to be the best employee that I can. provide the most value that I can, just because I feel grateful to be there. And that's not a good mindset to really have. So don't take after me. I know that a lot of people will say that the way that I approach things is bad, but I stayed at the startup company, and I'm technically still there, and just doing contracting on the side. So I started in April of 2016, and I still do a little bit of contracting for them on the side. It's mostly just stuff on the weekends.
All right. All right. So check it out. So we talked about imposter syndrome real quick, right? So what about people that have like the God complex? Like, hey, I'm God's gift to coding. You can't tell me anything, right? I seen you know what? You made a video that was so funny. I forget the name of it, but it was like you were like being very sarcastic, and you had a lot of cynicism about everything that was going on. He's like, hey, if you make this right here, you're doing the wrong thing. And if you type this button right here, you're doing the wrong thing, and blah, blah. I thought that was so funny and hilarious. But, you know, just like my grandmother told me when I was growing up, right? A joke is 70% truth and 30% ha-ha. So I know that at one point in time, you had to have that experience. Have you ever met anybody like that and made you feel that way?
You know, I haven't ran into anybody that was that aggressively with a God complex. Like, you know, I definitely have come across engineers where they definitely feel like, you know, they're the business, but like personally, I haven't ran into that. And then when I run into those people that are like that, they definitely catch a lot of my jokes. So, so I kind of bring them back down and try to humble them a little bit, and not too mean of a way. But yeah, like, you know, I come from a background where, you know, you gotta be on your toes. Like,
Quick on your feet. Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, like that, like if things came down to it, like I can handle my own. So,
but like, do you meet a lot of people on the other side, right, that are receptive? Like, if you humble yourself and say, hey man, I need some help, or I need to be able to do this. Do you find like in this field, people are willing to help other people?
Yes. A lot, actually. It's pretty crazy because, for a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot of people, but there does seem to be a really strong a sense of community when it comes to software engineers, especially for iOS, because that's what I'm part of. And you'll have people out there making YouTube videos, creating podcasts, writing articles, just because they enjoy doing that stuff. Now, there's definitely, you know, some profit behind some of these things, but a lot of the time it's just like, they're so passionate about what they're doing that they want to have more of it and share more of it. And that desire to share usually ends up helping a lot of people, because they're able to essentially teach, and other people that are just getting started can learn from the people that are willing to teach. So it's been a very inviting community. And I would say like the best community is, honestly, I feel it's on Twitter. And that's where you can actually receive a lot of help, reach out to people that you admire, and, you know, even make really great connections with people.
Yeah, I'm gonna try that, man. My Twitter skills right now, you know what I'm saying? But we're gonna get there, you know, eventually. So
yeah, we all got to start somewhere.
that's actually how I got a hold of you. You know, it was on Twitter. Now, hey, check it out. So, in the interest of moving on, right? So, we're fast forwarding right to 2020, right? So, you were working at a highly reputable company out there in California called Bird, okay?
Yeah.
And you know, it's a place where like you love this job so much, you were so passionate that you had like a 3.5 hour commute. Is that true?
Yeah, so I live in San Bernardino County,
Okay.
and Bird's office was in Santa Monica City, and that's 86 miles away. So I would take the train, and to take the train from here, like I'd have to drive to the train station, take the train from here to there, it would take 3.5 hours. So at the end of the day, I spent 7 hours commuting.
Man.
And it was usually only 4 days a week. Sometimes it would be 5. And I actually was getting to the point to where I could do it 3 days a week, but there was still so much that I wanted to learn that I was still going in. And I also liked going into the office. It was a really enjoyable experience. Like I said, there's a lot of people that are willing to help in this field. And, you know, it's really nice to have people that are interested in the same things that you're interested in. So it was a super long commute, but I did it. And the way that I made that commute work for me was I was actually working on the train. So it's not like 3.5 hours that I'm driving, right? That'd be very tough on everybody. Yes. 3.5 hours on the train actually isn't too bad if you view it from the perspective that I'm working while I'm on the train, right? And out of the amount of time that I could work during my total commute, I could get in about 5 hours of work. So if you view it as having like a second job, it's really not that bad, because you have your 8 hours that you do at your main company, you have your 5 hours that you do at your second company, and a lot of people do this. Mine just happens to take place on a train.
So like, you know, besides like, you know, getting to work around like cool people, what is like another thing that attracted you about working at Bird itself?
So the once again, going back to why Twitter's an amazing place, the way that I actually found out that Bird was hiring was because I was making that commute out to the startup already that I was working at and that I'm currently working at, right? I was making that commute out to Santa Monica 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays. And my favorite part of the commute was riding one of those electric scooters. And what I did was I posted a picture on Twitter saying, this is my favorite part of my commute. And I took a picture, and from that picture, somebody that was working at Bird reached out to me and they said, hey, we're actually hiring. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, I didn't even know that you guys were in Santa Monica. So I actually got a referral into the company and went through the interview process and ended up getting the job. So I really liked the product. So working somewhere that I actually liked the product was a huge plus.
How long did you work there before you were eventually laid off?
Yeah, so I started, my start date was like September 30th of 2019. So I was there for like 6 months in total. And then, you know, everything seemed like it was going good. It seemed like I was actually on track to make really big impacts at the company. I was like finally settled in, and I felt like I was talking to the right people to help make really good improvements towards the product. And what ended up happening was, you know, this whole entire pandemic happened and we go on lockdown. Now everybody's work from home. So, I mean, that's definitely nice for me. No more super long commute. I did miss the office while I was work from home, though. You know, like I said, I really enjoyed being there, but at least no more commute. And then about 2 weeks after the company had issued a work from home, like essentially almost mandatory work from home, we received a meeting on our calendar that said COVID update or something like that, or Bird update. And anybody that was invited to that meeting on Zoom was pretty much told that their position was no longer needed and they were laid off.
So by Zoom?
Yep. The Zoom of Doom is what we called it.
That's cold-blooded. Okay, so put like this. Now, we've been talking about, you know, your career and maturation as software developer. Let's stop right there for a second and let's talk about grown man type stuff, right? How do you break that down to your wife? Like, hey, baby, in the middle of this pandemic, I have just been laid off. As a man, Kilo Loco, how did you go about that and handle that? You know, for the people that's out there, man, they have to go through the same type of stuff.
So, it actually wasn't as hard for me as it would be for a lot of people. And the reason for that is because I was already working on stuff on the side, so I had extra income, right? So it wasn't like I was laid off and then I had no money coming in. And this is something that I have always encouraged, but definitely more so now, is that you should never only rely on a single source of income. You should always be doing something that will bring in a second source of income. Because what happens if your job goes away? A lot of people are just now experiencing what that's like if their job completely goes away. So, like, what other things can you do on the side? Do you have a skill that you can use on the weekend that will help making you some extra money? Do you know how to cut hair? Do you know how to do carpentry? Can you start selling stuff? Like these are things that you could do outside of your job. Maybe you enjoy it more than your job and you can start making money from it. And since I was kind of prepared by doing contracting on the side, as well as having this whole YouTube thing going and a couple of online courses that I teach, I wasn't really worried. So when I walked in, and as a man, you have to be the strong one. Well, I mean, that's a little bit sexist, but like this is the dynamic in our relationship. Like I have to be the strong one, right? And make sure that she feels safe and taken care of. Now, keep in mind that my sister is also here from Chicago right now. She was on campus, but then everything shuts down. She's coming to live with us. So now I have to break the news to both my wife and to my sister to let them know that, hey, our primary source of income is not going to be there anymore.
Right.
So when I walked in there, I had my head on straight. I knew that I had to break the news, but I had to make them feel comfortable because I know that they would definitely freak out way more than I would even freak out. And the way that I did that was I kind of walked in, and I wouldn't say I had a smile on my face, but I was definitely lighthearted. I was like joking about the situation, trying to keep it as calm as possible. And I said, look, we have a little bit saved up and we can survive on that. So there's going to still be food on the table, right? I'm also still doing this contracting on the side. I have a little side hustle going. There's that. So there's some money coming in still. And I am not scared at all because I know for a fact with my skill set that I can go out and I can find another job, no problem. And when I explained that to them, they were still like, concerned. But I feel like if I would have came in a wreck, it would have definitely been a much more, negative situation, right? So just positive mindset.
Definitely, like you set the tone how everyone should feel, by the way that you're handling the situation. That was a very good observation right there, brother. So now you got laid off, right? And you continuing to be in the house working on your side hustles and whatever the case may be. Now, how do you feel like your skills, resume, and background of what you've done prior helped you, like say, number one, to not be worried about it, like you were saying, and then number two, to land a new position at a FANG company? And you got to explain what FANG is because I never heard of it until you said something on your channel. Go ahead, brother.
Yeah. So, honestly, I feel like it's not even my resume because I actually don't even pay attention to my resume that much, whereas a lot of people would. And the benefit to the way that I approached my entire career was that I had my YouTube channel, right? So what is a job interview anyways? It's trying to find out who's going to be the best candidate for the job, and you're talking to a bunch of strangers. So essentially they look at your resume to find out, do you actually know what you're doing and can you actually perform this job? Right. So when you're able to create some type of content that is put out there into the world that demonstrates that you actually do know what you're doing, it definitely helps. So in my situation, I have a YouTube channel, right? And I have tutorials. I have videos that are just tutorials on how to do things in Swift. So if I have tutorials, I must know how to do something, which means that I'm less of a risk for a company to hire compared to somebody where they're just maybe looking at a piece of a paper, right?
Yes.
So just having something that can back you up, and I think this is very applicable to a lot of different careers, whether it be like a blog, like let's say you're into, let's say you're a plumber or something, right? And, maybe you want to go get hired at a company that pays better, or you just got laid off and you need to go get hired at a different plumbing company. If you had videos that was showing how to unplug a toilet or how to clear out a drain or something like that, if you had videos or maybe just wrote posts on something like that and it ranked on Google and people can find you and you had an audience, then you can actually take that to an employer and say, hey, look at, like, I know what I'm doing. I actually have an audience, and I can actually have my audience bring us even more traffic. And that's why you should hire me. Right. But then you could also go down the other route, which is like, hey, I have an audience. I could just go off and do this by myself, and I don't need to be employed by anybody else. So in regards to how I position myself, it's like I have something that's publicly visible in order to get hired. And I actually would say that if you're going to be trying to get into this career path specifically, it's very easy to get referrals. You can ask referrals from complete strangers. And the reason why I say that is because you could go on an app. It's called Blind. It's Blind app.
Blind, you say? Blind, like blind?
Yeah, like you can't see. So it's called Blind, and it's essentially an anonymous posting board. You can just go out and ask or say whatever you want. But essentially what happens is I see people saying, hey, I have this many years of experience, or hey, I'm trying to get into this company, and they can ask for a referral. And the reason why a stranger would refer you is because there's usually a cash incentive for them. So they might make like anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 just on you getting hired and staying there for 3 months. So it's a huge incentive for them. It's a huge incentive for you. And I would highly recommend that.
Hey, so for everybody out there, man, hey, go check out blind.com. Kilo Loco just gave y'all some gold right there.
And I'm not even like trying to promote the app or anything, but I have found that it's like very useful. And I think you could do the same thing on LinkedIn, probably. On LinkedIn, it's a little bit more face to face. Blind is completely anonymous. So you might want to have a little bit of a portfolio, but overall, yeah, getting referrals shouldn't be too crazy hard. And then
how long did it take you to get hired? Once you got laid off, how long did it take you to get hired at the new company that you work at? And could you talk a little bit about the new company and what you guys do over there?
Yeah, so I got laid off on March 27th, the day after I received a message, once again on Twitter, and they told me about this new position called developer advocate. Essentially, all it really is it's a position that allows the company to have somebody embedded into the software community or the coding community, and to like help promote the services as well as help the community in any other areas that they're working on, just so that they can always come back to me. And if they run into a problem that one of our tools can solve, I can bring it up. So a developer advocate is just helping developers do their job and making their lives as easy as possible. So from March 27th, I got laid off. March 28th, I received the message, went through the interview process. It took about 6 weeks in total to go through anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks in total to go through the entire process. I think it was 5 weeks. And after I did all the interviews, I got the offer, and I accepted the offer, and my first day was this past Monday, which was May 11th. So about 6 weeks difference, I would say, in between getting laid off and then hired at a new company, which is Amazon AWS, Amazon Web Services. And they are actually like pretty much the gold standard for like web technologies. So it's like a no-brainer when you get an opportunity to work there. And and just to answer your question about what FANG is an acronym that was brought up like a decade ago, that includes the companies Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, and Google. And the reason why those companies are kind of clumped together is because they're some of the top paying companies in the industry, but also at that time, I believe they were doing the best on the stock trading market as well, which is why they were also clumped together. That's why, Netflix is in there, even though it's kind of like a completely different type of company than the other companies. Facebook, Facebook is in there too, but like, Amazon has like a very strong presence in web. or in web technologies, Apple is like very technology oriented, and then Google obviously very technology oriented. But yeah.
So when you go out and you work for like companies like that, do they offer you any incentives like, hey, here's a few stocks if you come with us, signing bonus, whatever the case may be?
Absolutely. Yeah. So the other thing about these companies, I think all of the companies in Fang are publicly traded. I don't know about Netflix. I would assume they
Yeah,
are.
they are.
But yeah, so so the way that they're pay the way that you get paid from these companies is usually composed of three parts, and these three parts in total is what is called TC, total compensation. So TC. So your total compensation comes out to a number. It's not just your salary, right? So you would you would make a salary. You get what are called RSUs, restricted stock units, and that means that you can that they will be giving you stock in their company, but they're only giving you so much stock during a specific period. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And then the third part is I believe it's signing bonus. So you get a signing bonus as well. So your salary is just like any other salary, however much you're expecting to make a year. The RSUs, the restricted stock units, are stock in the company, and what they'll do is they'll say, we'll give you, let's say 100, just for a round number. We'll give you 100 stock in our company, right? Mm-hmm. And what they do is they don't actually give you 100 stock every year or like all at once or anything like that. What they do is they give you usually 5% your first year. So at the end of your first year, you would get your first 5% of your stock. The next year would be 15% of your stock. So now you would be able to get 20% of that stock. And then the following years would be the rest. So year 3 and year 4 are the remaining amounts, just cut in half. So like, I think, so that's 80. So 40 and 40. So 40% of your RSUs the third year, 40% of your RSUs the fourth year.
That sounds like an NFL contract. You know, they never want to give everybody the money up front. You get it on the back end. Like, hey, you know, you stick around 4 or 5 years, you know, we're slamming on there right there. Yeah. Hey, so, you know, finally, you know, Kilo, if you could tell somebody, like, how do you go about, like, right now, how would you suggest going about preparing to embark on the life of becoming a software engineer? Like, how do you get prepared to do that? And break it down to say, like, hey, today is May the 20th. So by January 1st, I want to apply for a position. How would you tell someone to prepare for something like that?
Well, so it's kind of hard because everybody's different, right? And I don't want to give that BS like, oh, it depends type of answer, but it kind of does. So let me try to break down the main paths that I see a lot of people go down, or like a lot of people ask about, and the way that I kind of give them a recommendation. So it just depends on what type of technology do you want to create, right? Do you want to make websites? Do you want to make Android apps, or do you want to make iOS apps? Which one of just choose one of those three, and that would help you determine where you want to go, right? So once you choose one of those, try to stick to it as much as possible, because there's going to be a lot of information saying that, oh, you need to learn this new thing, the new hotness, or you need to learn this other thing. Just learn what's the most common thing, right? So if you want to learn, let's say iOS, for example, stick to working on iOS. Don't try to learn both iOS and web, or iOS and Android, or, you know, any other combination of them. Just focus on one thing. That's the most important thing. And especially if you go down web development, you're going to be pulled in a lot of different ways. Choose something and stick to it, because what happens is you lose focus, and then nothing ends up coming of it, because you just could not stay focused on one thing. Once you decide which path you want to go down, if you want to go down web development, I would recommend that you would learn, you know, HTML and CSS. So Those are just like markup languages that like make websites look pretty. But then like how to actually interact with a website, make sure that like when you click a button, it does something specific, you learn JavaScript. So if you choose to go down web, you need to learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And it doesn't really matter which JavaScript framework. You're going to find out, you're going to come across the word framework a lot, but just, it doesn't matter. When you get to that point, just remember, it doesn't matter. Choose something that you see a lot of tutorials for, stick to it. Doesn't matter, just stick to it. If you decide to go down web or mobile development, which is iOS or Android, figure out, do you want to write native code or do you want to write cross-platform code? Now, native code allows you to only write on either iOS or Android. Cross-platform code allows you to write on both iOS and Android. There's pros and cons to that. You can look into it. Just figure out which one you want to do. iOS native, Android native, cross-platform. Which one do you want to do? Once you come to a decision on that, and it doesn't matter, all of them are going to get you hired. Focus on that. Don't switch. Now, once you made that decision, figure out, where do you want to work? Do you want to work at a super huge company like Google, Amazon, or Apple or something like that, right? Or are you okay with working at a startup? Are you okay with working at a medium-sized company that, you know, some people hear about, but it's not as big as like something like Amazon, right? Figure out, where do you want to work? And then do a little bit of research on what technologies they're working with, and then learn some of those, right? So now that you've made your decision on which path you're going to go, I would say just learn and start creating stuff. It doesn't matter how crappy it is, just create stuff. Determine your path, create stuff, and put it out there for the world to see, and do that as much as you possibly can.
How do people go about putting it out? I've heard you say that like about 30 minutes ago, like, hey, you created an app and you put it out there in the App Store. How do software engineers go about giving other people their access to their apps that they create?
Yeah, so there's two paths that you could go about getting your app into somebody's hands. One is a less formal path, which is like putting it up on a website that's like GitHub, and all this type of sites are a site like GitHub is just a site where you're able to put your code up there and all the files live right there, and it makes it open so that anybody else can download it. So, and you can choose whether it's open to the public or if it's only open to you. You can put something up there publicly, and then they can download it, and then they can play with it. That's one way to do it. Employers are not going to do that, but it is one way to do that. The best way to go about putting your app out there, or like whatever out there into the world, is to actually make it live, right? Which means publishing it onto the App Store, the Play Store, or if it's a website, making sure that that website is hosted somewhere that you can just say www.com/my or www.mywebsite.com, and then they can see the website right there. So that's what I mean by putting your app.
When you talk about so let's say you talked about, and I got to hurry up and get out of here, but when you talk about making it live, right? So like you make it live, they go in the App Store, people find it. How do you get the credit for that? Like, do you make it a paid app? Do you make it a free app? Like let's say you made it a free app and it just blew up overnight, right? Like how do they find Kilo Loco and just say, hey, come Kilo Loco, come work for us?
Because what you would do is you could either provide them with a link directly to the app, or you could tell them to just search for it in the App Store. Usually you want to provide a link, make it as easy as possible for people. And then what you would actually see is like you would have the app icon, right? Little squircle thing. And then you would have like the title up here. But then in like gray, you would actually see like the developer that actually made it. Now, you don't usually see names. It's usually a company. But as an individual, you would actually see your name right there.
Okay, man, that's great. Hey, man, we got to get out of here. Hey, Kilo Loco, man, thank you for coming out and blessing us with your presence, brother. Tell the people where they can find you and reach out to you if you don't mind.
Absolutely. So all my stuff can be found if you just Google Kilo space Loco. But like if you want to reach out to me specifically on Twitter or Instagram, you can find me at Kilo KILO _ Loco LOCO.
Hey, you thought I was gonna let you get out of here. Tell me, how you come up with that name, man?
It's a funny story. My grandmother, she's Colombian, and she could never spell my name on the presents, so it'd always be spelled wrong. My real name is Kyle, and whenever she would write my name, KYLO KILE, eventually it became Kilo, and I went with Kilo, and then eventually I wanted to have something that would also represent my last name, which is Lee. So I wanted to have that L in there, so KL, and I ended up coming up with Kilo Loco since I'm mixed.
Hey,
so
I tell you what, y'all heard it here first. Kilo Loco, Cisco Soldier, aka Uncle Trey. See y'all later. Thank y'all for tuning in. All right, peace.